Chapter 1. The Breathing Behind the Door. My friend Alex was always a little different. Not just quirky or eccentric, but someone who seemed to live inside his own fears. A shadowy world that none of us could really understand. Back then, I thought it was just paranoia. Maybe the result of too much stress or bad luck. Everyone has weird habits, right? But what was happening in his apartment soon started to feel like something darker, something very real. Alex couldn't sleep at night. He was restless, pacing, always checking the locks on the door and windows. Curtains would be drawn tightly shut, blocking out any moonlight or street lamps. Sometimes the silence in his apartment was so thick, it felt like the walls were holding their breath. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I finally asked him what exactly he was afraid of. He hesitated, looking around as if worried someone might be listening. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I hear breathing behind the door. Not footsteps, not knocking, just breathing." I wanted to laugh it off, tell him it was probably just the house settling or the heater humming. But there was something in his voice, a mixture of fear and certainty, that stopped me. Still, I thought maybe he was imagining things. Maybe stress was getting the best of him. But every night, before going to bed, he'd push a heavy old dresser against the front door. It was awkward and looked a little ridiculous, but I never argued. One night, I stayed over at his apartment. I thought I'd see for myself if there was anything strange going on.
The first few hours were quiet, but then, around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The room was dark, except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window. I saw Alex standing motionless in the living room, his face pale and tense. The dresser he always pushed in front of the door was no longer blocking it. It had been moved aside. The door stood wide open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. I felt my heart race. I asked him, barely able to whisper, "Why did you open the door?" He didn't answer at first. Then he slowly turned towards me, his eyes wide and unblinking. His voice was barely audible. "I didn't open it." His words sent a chill down my spine. I watched as he lifted his shirt, and my blood ran cold. On his chest were 3 deep, fresh scratches, bleeding slightly in the moonlight. They formed 2 clear words, carved cruelly into his skin. "Let me in." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For a moment, we just stared at each other in silence, the air thick with fear. I wanted to ask what it meant, who did this, but no words came out. The rest of the night passed in a haze of unease and whispered doubts. I didn't sleep. And when morning came, the sun's light did little to chase away the shadows lingering in my mind. I knew then that this wasn't just Alex's paranoia. Something else was in that apartment. Something waiting for its chance.
Chapter 2. When Fear Becomes Reality. The morning after that terrifying night, the apartment felt heavier, like the darkness from the night before had followed us into daylight. Alex was quiet, withdrawn, as if carrying an invisible weight. I wanted to ask questions, to understand what had happened, but he just avoided my gaze. I decided to dig deeper. I started asking around the neighborhood, talking to other tenants and neighbors. It turned out this wasn't the first strange event in that building. Years ago, a family who lived in Alex's apartment simply disappeared. No one knew where they went, and no one wanted to talk about it. Some said there were strange noises at night, whispers, faint cries, and most chillingly, the same slow, steady breathing Alex had heard. I began to realize Alex's paranoia was something else entirely. It was a warning, or maybe a curse, a dark secret tied to that apartment, to the door, and to the unknown presence lurking just beyond. That night, I stayed over again. This time, I wasn't going to ignore the signs. The clock ticked closer to 3 a.m., and then it began. The breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone standing just on the other side of the door, waiting.
Alex didn't move. He didn't even try to push the dresser in front of the door. He just stared, wide-eyed, frozen in fear. Then the breathing grew louder, sharper, more urgent, until it felt like the air itself was being sucked out of the room. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. Something was here, something real. Suddenly, there was a soft knock. 1, 2, 3. Alex's voice broke the silence. "Don't open it. That's not me." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen. Then the door creaked open, just a crack, and the darkness seemed to spill into the room like a living thing. I saw movement, shadowy, shapeless, creeping closer, accompanied by a voice that wasn't human. It whispered my name. And then the words, "Let me in." I wanted to slam the door shut, but my hands wouldn't obey. Alex stepped forward, eyes glazed, as if something else had taken control of him. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of his voice. But it wasn't Alex speaking anymore. It was something else. Something hungry.
This story isn't over. Subscribe if you want the rest.